Well, our next guest, her name is Kesha as well. Me and her went to high school together in Sacramento. It's just amazing to hear people's journeys, just going to high school with people you just really don't know what they're going through. You know, it's just that's just my friend. Um, so Kesha, how was earlier years with your mom?
Um, I noticed my mom was very attentive, but I think I noticed looking back, she wanted to be the mom that she didn't have. She started out, we were always dressed well, always had everything we wanted, my brother. But at a young age, I was always more mature. I noticed in my peers because I was exposed to things that a child shouldn't have to understand or have to deal with. And I noticed at a very, very young age, even in this picture with my mom and my brother and I, we lived in Spain. I noticed then something was wrong with my mom. There would be incidents she didn't handle well, like I remember her asking me to get a pair of shoes. Shoes can mean any type of shoes to a 4-year-old. And I went and got my patent leather shoes, and I think it made her upset. And she stood across the bedroom and she threw the shoe and it cracked my skull.
Mm-hmm.
And I bled. And I remember her going in panic mode. My dad was at work. He was in the Air Force. And I noticed her reaction. She knew what she did went too far, but there was a lot of incidents like that. She didn't handle disciplining us well. She was very, unfortunately abusive, and I noticed that at a very young age. So when you've been abused at a very, very young age, I
Mm-hmm.
never bonded with her. I was always afraid of her. I had no connection. I don't remember. I remember one time hugging her when I was in 5th grade and the smell of her perfume, and she had a lot of hair. But I just always was uncomfortable around her, even till this age. I have no connection, no bond with her. My mother suffered a
Yeah.
traumatic childhood, and that was recognized when I first initially met my grandmother. I saw the comparison there.
Mm. So do you feel like, like Lakeisha said earlier, it's genetics, your grandmother possibly had mental health issues, and now your mother um, probably was physically and emotionally abused by her own mother, so it's just trickling down, you
Well, we
know.
came back from Spain. We came back from Spain. I was 4 years old. I was getting ready to just turn. That was the turning point in my life and my mother's life. That my mother was never that trying to dote on as kids in Spain was all gone. We
Mhm.
had came back from the Spain. My dad came back from the States, and I never remember my grandma's face. I just remember her. If that sounds crazy, I don't know if it was survival mode or what. I just remember her house. She had a big house. I remember her behavioral traits are so much like my mom. They love money. They love extravagant gifts. I remember my grandmother taking me in the store. She's like, buy whatever you want. That's humongous. And she loaded up the car with everything I wanted. My mom was the same. They learned to love through that materialistic things. And
Mm.
we stayed with my grandmother for a few months, and then we got stationed to Minot. But in that stay of my grandmother's house, I saw my grandmother beat her kids and talk to my aunt awful and tell her she was ugly and nobody wants you, and just really psychologically, emotionally abusive ways. We ended up getting stationed to Minot, North Dakota, and within that week of Minot, North Dakota, we found out my uncle was murdered by my grandma. He was 17. He was murdered 3 days before his 18th birthday. That was the turning point of my mom. She was cold, very distant, very detached. My father had to kind of rehabilitate her because she quit eating and she wouldn't talk. She would just sit in a room. So through our childhood after that, it was hell. It was hell. It was really hell. And I remember my first time confronting my mom. I was in 5th grade. she beat me so bad. And I remember confronting her, and I told her, because her thing was, I'm sorry, after it was happened. And I told her, I said, you're not sorry because you do this all the time. And I remember looking at her and I said, I know where you got this from. And she looked at me crazy. And I said, you're like your mom. She hated her mother, turned out to be just like her mother.
Mm. How do you feel, Lakeisha, about, what you've heard and, with the, generational curse of being emotional and physically abusive?
I'm sorry you had to go through that. I really am. That's a lot to carry for anybody, especially as a kid growing up and learning to survive and not learning
survival.
Not having a relationship based on love, but a relationship based on survival. Because being able to do that, it robs you of your childhood. It robs you of your innocence. It robs you of your trust. And it gives you a different view of the world and of people at a very young age. And so now you're trying to navigate and almost becoming an adult at a very young age. This is what I know trust to be, so this is not a good thing, so let me do something different. So, but even in the attachment of it, the attachment styles, the family system, dysfunction of the family that your mom was brought up in as well, it doesn't excuse what she did, but it definitely makes sense as to why she did it.
Why she did it, yes. And I always say that I still have a lot of anger towards her because she abandoned us and she's financially very well off, and she'll do things like call us when she gets lonely, and she'll brag and boast about what she has. And it makes me feel less than, because I ended up going through a course as a single mom with 3 sons and struggled. We were homeless. And I could never call her and ask her for help. I asked her one time to help me. I told her I had to go to jail because I couldn't afford a $160 fine. And her response was, why didn't you call me? I'd never been in trouble legally, ever. And I told her I didn't call you because I didn't need it thrown in my face. And the next day she called me and she threw it in my face. And it's just, I think I'm angry at her because you're so financially well off. You have the means to get all the psychological help that you needed, but you didn't. And you call me and you make fun of me because I'm not where I need to be financially, or because I didn't finish my degree like you. But I chose to put my children before anybody, because you can always go back and finish your degree, but you can never go back and be a mother.
Right.
So I struggle. And now I'm 45 and my boys are grown, and now I'm realizing the effects of my childhood have really done to me. I think I was in such survival mode. I was a mom at 20 in an abusive marriage, and I never dealt with Kesha. And now my kids are grown, and I'm finding out that I have to deal with Kesha because now Kesha's in front of me, and I don't want to deal with certain things. But I sat back and I realized there's some things that I run all the time. I have moved in the last 10 years, probably 9 times, running in search of something, running in search of a promise or something that I never got. After I left my husband, I would run from him, go back to him, run from him. But that is something I saw my mom do a lot. My mom ran because her mother was.
Do you feel, I think me and Kesha are kind of on the same paths on certain things, I guess, being that single mom, and now that our children are grown, is trying to find out, like, who is Shay?
Who are we?
Yeah, and I think now that she has so much idle time, because I was going through something too, and I'll be telling people, I don't know if I'm still going through postpartum depression, and the boy is 21 years old, I don't know, but it's like,
you gotta go
what you call it after they leave the home. And it was like, who am I now? Because I've been on survival mode to fix, it was always plan A through Z. I got to get this done, make sure this light bill is done. He got to have some clothes. Now he's not in the house. Now it's like, well, who am I? Now that Kesha is forced to really face herself in the mirror, do you feel like there's some things that she needs to work on to get over this hump, to really embrace who she is and start to love who she is, and start to let these walls go down in her past, but start learning how to pick up the pieces to move forward.
Absolutely, I do. I agree with all of that. It's not going to be an easy task to do, but all the things that happen to you can coexist with the good things that can come your way. So you can't change what happened. Your feelings about it are valid and rightfully so. You should be angry with your mom. You should feel like, you deserved more because you did. But with that being said, now that you are facing yourself and having this time to think about it, instead of just surviving, what would it look like to just be? What would it look like to just exist in this moment, be present in this moment, and honor yourself in that moment?
I do give myself praise. The day my youngest baby graduated, I generally don't put things on Facebook, but I did put a caption of each one of my sons. And it was, I'm actually the first woman in my family to break the generational curse. My grandmother had 9 kids. Unfortunately, they said 5 of them were killed by her. Only 4 live. She's never raised her kids because she was in and out of prison. My mother didn't raise me or my brother. I was the only one that raised my children by myself. And that might not be an accomplishment to some, but coming from what I came from, it's huge. All my sons are not in prison. They don't have any issues. They don't have any grandkids. I struggle some things there because they're still, they're young adolescents. And my dad told me one day, you can't take when they act out as it's personal towards you. And I do, because I'm looking at them, I didn't have a mom, like, you need to appreciate me a little more, but that's just typical for kids. So, but I have been through a lot, my father raised me, and unfortunately he did the best he could, and we were making peace with some things there. He was a womanizer. He was a good man, but he picked the worst wives. Oh Lord, he did. And those marriages affected us because I was molested by his wife's father. So I was enduring at the age of 4th grade, going to visit him because he didn't have custody of me. I was being molested in his care, and then he would drop me off at home and I would be beat by my mom. And so it was survival. Go to school, try to act like things didn't happen, cover bruises. Didn't even know what the terminology was that was happening to me sexually until I was in sex ed, and that was brought out when the teacher was discussing it. And I remember feeling like the whole classroom was caving in on me because everybody knew this dark secret I was hiding. But I went into just survival mode all the way till adulthood. But now I look at it that there wasn't anything wrong with me. Something wrong with the effed up people that were around me as adults. Because I think I came out. I have issues and things, far as trust. I don't trust people. When your mom has told you she wished you were dead, and our last conversation, she told me that my son will probably get murdered. You don't trust people. I always feel like when you come in my life and you're going to love me, you're going to leave and you're going to do something to sabotage that, whatever. Or if you do things for me, you're not doing it because you love me, you're doing it because you want something from me. So I have a lot of trust issues. But I still want to love people. I still want to have connections. I don't want to be like my mother. She lives in a big house by herself with just her dog because she cut everybody off. I don't want to be like that.
Lakeisha, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So I'm just saying there are things there. Even though I've been through what I've been through, I still look at the fact that I'm an amazing person, like what I've been through. And I've been on drugs. I've never been out in the streets. So God has some kind of guardian angel in my favor, because I probably should be dead by now for everything that I've endured.
Yeah.
That's powerful to hear. You almost had me in tears. I keep it together.
And that's why I said, I think I wanted to touch on this because, like I said, I have my grandmother, I have my mother and aunties, to celebrate. This past week, going to Flagstaff and just giving my mom a break with my grandmother dealing with dementia has been really hard for me to face the fact. And before I left Flagstaff, I went, to NAU campus and just walked around and the cemeteries across the street. And I just said, let me go check on my grandpa, like he's sitting there waiting on me. But I went to my grandfather's grave, and he's been deceased now since 2007. But I just broke down this morning, and I was just like, please just watch over her, watch over my mom's mind state, because it's like having to tell a new story every day, even though you told it to her yesterday. So I'm grateful for her to be in my life, but it's hard to watch the woman that I knew dwindle away in my face. So I'm grateful to still have her, but I never would imagine, going through what Kia went through. Yes, you do have siblings, but they were older, so you kind of grew up like an only child. And but I can't imagine, I'm an only child pretty much the way I grew up, so I can't imagine losing my mom at 42, and let alone you did it at 14. And then, Johnny and Kesha, you both were raised by your father, and I never had that relationship with my father. I had a close bond with my father's side of the family, but not him, personally. So I guess I have to deal, with you guys go through on Mother's Day. I deal with that on Father's Day, you know what I mean? So it's just like whoopie doo. I have to celebrate my uncles and my grandfather. So I step back and just let the wonderful men like Johnny, he's an excellent father.
Would you say that you turned out to be the father that you were, just as an example of what you hadn't had growing up with your mom?
Were you addressing that to me?
Yes.
I guess in some ways it plays a role. I guess a lot of that may come from my father. He was an excellent father, a provider, for me and my sister. So it kind of goes that way, at least try to be there for my sons, and be a presence for them. Mm-hmm. But sometimes for me, it's kind of two separate things, because I think that may be something more I would want to ask my sister, but my sister doesn't have any kids. But I think sometimes I look at that situation, I always used to think, okay, my dad was in my life and it was great being a boy and having a father. Mm-hmm. And for my sister growing up as a young girl, not having a mother there, I think she had probably her own set of issues because of that mother bond in those teenage years. Mm-hmm. Now, for me, I would say it probably affected me more as I got older because I felt like, oh, I'm good. I got my dad, I'm a boy. I didn't need it. I'm not a mama's boy. I used to take pride in that. But as I got older, I was like, I need my mom when I'm dealing with relationship problems, or I have questions about the person I'm dating, or I had a breakup and I can't go to my mom and say, Mom, why did this happen? Or what should I do? So I guess when it comes to me, the fact that I have my dad plays a good role into my son's life, but, it would be something that maybe more of a situation with my sister. She had kids and then not having a mom.
Mm-hmm. I would say too, because people ask me, how did you know how to be such a great mom when you didn't have one? I said, because I never wanted my kids to know what it felt like to need one and not have one. Mm-hmm. So exactly. I tried to thrive in that absence area, and always try to go think about things that I felt were skipped or missed in my life. And I'm big on communication with my. That's one of the huge things I learned as a child. I was shamed a lot of times for wanting to get counseling, wanting to speak on demons that were in our childhood, because I saw it was a pattern. And so I'm huge with my boy now. Hey, do you need to ever tell me I'm here. You know, I think because in our Black culture, even in the white culture, because my mom is biracial, the white culture does it. My grandmother suffered mental illness, but they did it because they had money. They didn't want to be revealed. So it's just one of those things, though. And, you know, even through the storms of what we've all been through, we have to find something great in it all to fight. And I take grant that, you know, I turned out to be pretty darn good, but I was set out to deal with it. So I'm not where I want to be, but I'm where I need to be. And I'm trying to grow into who I want to be and who God has me destined to be. And I think that's all we can do is just take one step at a time. It doesn't help though when we got young ones looking at us our every step, because you don't want to make mistakes along the way, but you're going to make them.
Yeah.
And to follow up with your question, you know, in my situation, I have 2 kids from 2 different mothers, and I'm not with either of the mothers. So I think maybe the relationship with my mom comes to play in that with a little bit, because usually when you have that bond with your mother, I think that kind of helps when you do go into relationships with the people you have kids with. And I was married and got divorced. And so I think, you know, some of that comes into play a little bit because my mother wasn't there. Maybe she could have gave me advice in marriage and, you know, how to deal with this with the person that you're married to or the person you have a child with. So I think not having a mom plays a role in that a little bit for me.
You know, though, life is not black and white. It's sometimes gray. I had my mom, but she taught me to run from my marriage. She taught me when things got difficult, you run. And then there was another part of me that my father, he stayed in unhealthy marriages. I stayed in an unhealthy marriage. I would leave, come back. So I taught my kids some mixed messages there. I know my mother told me one time she didn't want anything to do with me because she thought I was a weak individual because I chose to stay in my marriage. And I told her, I said, had you not thought about maybe if you would have gotten counseling and Dad, maybe the dynamics of everything for me and Mom would have been different. But if you call me weak for wanting the best for my kids, that what I thought was the best at that time, then that's your problem, not mine. You know, you didn't give me the greatest tools to be a mom or a wife. I had to learn and figure it out on my own. And I still struggle with it. I struggle with it all, but it's just, I see now though, I cried a lot of times growing up because why did my mom love me? Why didn't she want us around? Why did she beat us? But as I got older, I realized it was good that I parted away from her. When I got 19, I didn't step foot back at my mother's house 17 years later. That was the last time I stepped foot in my mother's house. My brother dealt with my mom a lot, and it showed. He turned out to be abusive to his kids. He struggled in areas with attachment and the maternal instinct. He's doing a lot better now because he's gotten some counseling, but I'm thankful that I wasn't around my mom, especially when I was 19, 20, just becoming a mom, because I probably would have repeated the same behavior she did. So I love her, but I don't like her. I can't be around her because her spirit is so overwhelming, and it makes me question who I am, and it makes me feel bad about who I go back into that little girl, that abused little girl. So I've accepted where we're at. I don't think I'll ever have a relationship with her. And I found peace with that when my grandmother died. My grandmother never made peace with her kids. So sometimes you just have to take things for what they are, accept it, and do what you can with what you can and move forward.
Lakeisha, what do you feel on how she just ended that? I guess I ended on that note. How do you know when to let the past be the past to move forward, and don't let the past define your future either? How do you know when it's just time to just let it go and move forward?
Reconciliation takes both sides. It's a mutual relationship. So you can't fix something if another person won't even acknowledge that it's broke, or acknowledge that they play a part in it being broke as well too. Not saying that they are solely responsible for getting it back together. Although it sounds like her mom has played a very big part in that. But it doesn't make it any easier to face on your own as well too, knowing that you will never get a chance to reconcile a relationship or rebuild a relationship, even if that's what you're craving. But you can't fix something or move forward with something if another person isn't willing to help you play that part and the role that they play in that relationship as well too. And then also culturally, another thing that culturally and generationally that we don't do a lot of is learn and teach conflict resolution. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the things that we experience growing up and even as adults, we suffer in silence alone because we don't want to deal with those difficult conversations of, well, even if you were wrong, even if you were right, that's not the point of it. You can have a disagreement with somebody and still carry on in that disagreement for the betterment of the situation, being able to resolve the conflict in a healthy way versus taking shots at people and calling them names or belittling them because you disagree with them completely. But learning conflict resolution in a healthy way, in a productive way, goes a very long way, for you individually and in your own relationships, whether that's a personal relationship, friendship, family relationship, or even just a work environment relationship.
Mm-hmm. Well, Kia or Cookie, do you have any questions about to close this out for Lakeisha?
No, I definitely, appreciate the insight because it made me think about a few things that, especially when it comes to my relationships and conflict resolution, I have to get a book to read in regards to conflict resolution. It's very, very good resource. But yeah, that's extremely hard to do just in regards to repairing relationships too. Because I know with my mom's side of the family, like, we're not cool. Shay's probably like the only cousin who I feel is also like a sister that I'm really close with. But I know there's probably going to be a time where I maybe need to amend that relationship, but it also starts with having the right skills in place too.
Right. So I think that's very important, is having those skills, because you don't want to start off where you left off either. So
have those skills and managing your expectations of it as well too. Don't go in there thinking that you're going to change the world with one conversation. They don't hear yourself up.
Right. Yeah, Johnny, do you have any? Yeah, do you have anything, Johnny, that you want to ask Lakeisha?
I do want to say this though, and I understand the young lady's thought about what she went through, and probably not wanting to forgive her mom or have a relationship with her mom. And I was very bitter and felt like that at one time, but I got to the point where I didn't want to carry a burden of unforgiveness for my mom. I'm not the judge and jury for her, and I'm not perfect by any means. So, sometimes it's hard to get to that point to forgive, and sometimes it takes counseling, sometimes it takes prayer or your spiritual life or whatever, but, I can't be the judge of another human being. You can hold on to that weight and you can let it be a burden, and it's hard. It is really hard, but for me right now, I would love to be able to have the opportunity to talk to my mom and say, you know what, I don't hold any grudge towards you whatsoever. I'm at peace with what happened. I understand what happened more, and she can accept it or not. Maybe I won't ever get the chance to it, but for me personally, I feel like I don't have that weight over me. Now, I know it could affect me in some ways. I think it does. Like I said, I'm not a perfect person. But just for the fact that I can sit here today and talk about this and not have it, hold me down or be a burden, because I wasn't always able to talk about this. And as men, I never brought this up. I never had a session like this. I was able to kind of talk to it with my individual friends on a one-on-one basis, but to be in something like this, share what I share, no. So, just some advice on holding on to stuff and grudges and just being unforgiving is hard. It really is hard to understand that.
But forgiveness is for you and not for the other person. Right. It's for
and
you.
I don't mean to sound like
get
the
through.
bitter. Yeah. I guess I sound bitter because I just tried to reconcile a relationship with her over the summer and it went so south. Her way of me cutting her off is when she attacks my kids. I'm not going to deal with that.
Right.
I do need to forgive her though. I do. And that's where I finally decided, maybe now that I'm not raising kids anymore, it's time for me to go get counseling. I had some bad experiences in counseling as a kid. I was shamed for trying to speak the truth about what happened to me. So I just shut down and I never went there. But no, I told myself last year, you deserve to fix what was damaged. You deserve that. And that I'm hoping I'll learn to be able to put things in process to find healing with my mom and accept her. But that's a defense mechanism why I'm the way I am. My mother, I can't explain to you the hurt that when you drive down the street and you pull up to her and she doesn't even acknowledge you. It's rejects. Or you knock on her door at 5th grade and she tells you to get the hell away from her door. That's
and
a protective
mechanisms are what we come up with to deal with it.
Yes. I'm not a mean, bitter person, and I don't want to be a mean, bitter person. So yeah, I decided that I'm going to get counseling. I'm going to deal with the grieving of being molested and all this stuff, so that it doesn't tear me down, because I don't want to be a person. So you're absolutely.
Keisha, you stated that because you and Kesha are in the same area in Texas. I know you mentioned that
I'm moving back to Atlanta. I took a job offer. So.
Oh, well, yay to that. That's a good celebration.
Congratulations.
Well, maybe you can still link up with Lakeisha maybe on a couple of sessions. I know you were saying that you had a couple of things coming up this summer out there in Texas, and I think in the DeSoto area.
Definitely. I want to get into becoming a mentor when I get to that point of healing and dealing with my own battles. I definitely want to write a book about my journey. And I've already worked on some of it, called Shedding the Shadows of Shame, because I don't live in shame anymore for what I've been through. I'm a walking miracle. And so I want to share my story eventually in due time, when it's time for me to be transparent, because there's a lot of young people out there walking around that don't look like what we've been through.
And I think that's the stereotype. Like, I always got like, oh, you don't look like the type that went through that, or you didn't look like you know, or you wouldn't accept a man beating you up. And it's like, okay, I didn't know you can fight, you know, a 6'7" man, first of all. Or I just woke up that morning and wanted to get beat up, you know. So it's always that you don't look like the type. And it's like, well, what is the type, you know? So I think a lot of things going forward is.
It's a blessing though, because I have seen people that look like what we've been through. So I think having an appearance of showing that we can heal through the dramatic is kind of reassuring and refreshing to somebody going through what we're going through. You know what I'm saying? Because I didn't always look like what I feel like, or what I didn't always feel like what I look like. But maybe somebody going through that, they can look at her and be like, wow, where she's at, I can get there too.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, Lakeisha, I'm gonna let you end this out. If there's anything you want to shed light on for all of us, please go ahead.
Thank you guys for having me. Thank you for being so transparent and honest in your conversations. I am moved and empowered by all of you, by all of your stories. There are different things that I would love to touch on with all of you. Just in the therapist side of me, my therapist mind is like constantly going. I was like slowly taking notes for my own self. But even just going forward and continuing to grow within yourself and in your journey, remember to always take time for yourself, to acknowledge where you are, regardless of whatever anybody else says or thinks or perceives how you should be. You have to acknowledge that space for yourself, and don't punish yourself because you're not where you want to be, or even where you came from. There's times that not everything's gonna go how you planned it, and that's okay. And there's times where things will go extremely right. That's fine too. But just being able to take that space for yourself and own that and recognize that you are a powerful person. You are a strong person, or a person who carries strength, but that can also coexist with bad times as well too. It doesn't negate who you are at your core.
Robin recommended you on Facebook, and thank you for just, joining us and letting us share our journeys of, this non-traditional Mother's Day topic. And Kia and Cookie, thank you for joining us. And Mr. John Dunlap, I'm not gonna call you by your nickname. And and Keisha and Lakeisha, thank you all for joining us today.